Right, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. According to the clock on the mics, it has gone 5 o'clock, so we'll make a start. There are members of the public here, so I will go through the evacuation procedure. A fire drill is not expected tonight, so if the alarm sounds, please evacuate the building quickly and calmly. Please use the stairs and do not use the lifts. Once out of the building, please gather outside the Yorkshire Bank on the opposite side of the road. Exit by the door by which you entered the room or by the fire exits which are clearly indicated by the standard green fire exit signs. If you need any assistance in evacuating the building, please make yourself known to a member of staff. As a piece of housekeeping, can we all please make sure that our mobile phones are turned off or set to silent? Don't want them going off in the middle and embarrassing anyone. And tonight's meeting is being recorded both by the council and I believe a member of the public for future broadcast. The council one will go up on our YouTube channel, usually within 24, 48 hours. Okay. Do we have any apologies?
Councillor Hancock gave apologies, substitute Councillor Phillips. Councillor Panda apologies for the substitute Councillor Evans. And Councillor Longden gave his apologies today, unfortunately.
Okay. I think that's everyone accounted for. Minutes of the last meeting. Is everyone happy for me to sign these as a true and accurate record of what happened last time? Thank you. That moves us on to declarations of interest. Does anyone have any items of declarations of interest that aren't already printed in the agenda? Councillor Shepherd.
In relation to item 1, Chair, it's for clarification that the community centre that my director was offered a commuted sum by the developer for this development, but has not been forthcoming this time, but I think it's important that it's noted down. Obviously, what I believe one of the speakers I might know. And also, I had contact with a few residents.
Declarations of interest? No. So are there any declarations of contact? Councillor Evans?
Correct in saying that the Willis Grove application has been deferred, because I have had a resident contact me about that, but it's not on this list. It's in the agenda.
I believe there is a request, but that will be down to the committee to consider whether it is to be deferred or not.
If that's the case, so a resident did come out and speak to me because he knew that I was a councillor. I didn't give any indication as to how I would vote on the application.
Item 3, Smithfield. I've had communication with both the father of the applicant and also a number of residents down that road, but I haven't given any indication on how I'll vote.
On item number 1, but again, I haven't given any indication on how I'll vote.
Everyone's declarations of contact? Okay, thank you. So we then move on to applications where we have members of the public wishing to speak. We have members of the public wishing to speak on items 1 and 3. Members who are of the public who are wishing to speak, you do have 3 minutes in which to speak to the committee. Please make all the points that you wish to do so within those 3 minutes, because once you've had those 3 minutes, you can't then come back in even if something is raised by the committee in debate. Once committee has moved into debate, you have no other opportunity to come in. So I know 3 minutes may sound a long time, but it isn't when you get to the end of it, so please try and do that. We may come back to you at the end, members of the committee, in case they have any points they wish to raise of clarification. I think that's everything I need to warn the public about. So, Jackie, you ready to take on item 1? Thank you.
Officers are requesting that this application is further deferred to enable Council's opinion of the situation to be sought to aid members when considering the application. It is hoped that this will be received in time for the application to be reported to committee on the 10th of September 2019. Okay, you want me to continue with the application? Yeah. This is an outline application with all matters reserved for the erection of up to 575 dwellings, including a mixed-use neighbourhood centre, public open space, footpaths, cycleways, water attenuation basins, associated infrastructure, and also includes the realignment of Gypsy Lane. The site is located west of Maple Park and north of Gypsy Lane and marks the southern edge of the urban area of Nuneaton and extends over 28 hectares in total. The site is bounded by Gypsy Lane to the south, the Coventry Canal to the west, the Griff Brook and the playing fields of George Eliot School to the north, along with the residential area of Braidstone Road and Red Deeps, Wenbrook to the east, beyond which is existing open space of Marston Lane Meadows, with the residential area of Maple Park on the opposite side of Marston Lane. There are a number of mature trees on the site which are arranged in 2 columns, and these delineate historic field boundaries. The site exhibits good linkages to the nearby National Cycle Network, both Nuneaton and Bedworth town centres, the existing town centre train stations, and the more recent Bermuda Park station on St George's Road. There have been 22 objections from 20 addresses, and responses from Councillor Condarker. Notwithstanding the level objection received, this application is being presented to committee at the request of Councillor Jill Shepherd. Members will recall deferring the application at the last meeting to enable officers to further discuss Section 106 contributions towards sports development funding and for play and open space, which was specifically for the contribution towards the destination parks and swimming pools. The applicant has indicated that they are not willing to consider either of these requested contributions and would wish for you to determine the application before you. The key issues to assess in the determination of this application are set before you. The principle of the development for the site is set in the Borough Plan 2019 as the land is allocated as a strategic site under HSG 3. This policy sets out how the strategic site will be developed, principally for residential use and to include a mix of community uses. The key development principles included in the policy mention that this land will provide circa 575 dwellings in a mix of dwelling types and sizes, on-site play and open space facilities, footpaths, cycleways, provision of on-site bus infrastructure, provision of a local centre, including a community hall, and contributions for various off-site provisions. In relation to the visual amenity and landscape character, the site is located within the Nuneaton and Bedworth urban fringe landscape character area, which is deemed to be of moderate value in need of enhancement with the conservation of farmland, hedgerows and trees. The evidence base indicates that this specific site is of low value and sensitivity is of a lower value and sensitivity than the wider character area, and therefore has the capacity to accommodate residential development without causing substantial harm to the character area. As this is an outline application, there could be many different final forms of development, since the details are reserved for consideration later. That said, given the indicated amount of open space provided, especially that which flanks the site on the eastern and northern boundaries, it is considered that regard has been taken to the existing setting and that the site can be adequately address the setting of the area. All distance standards in the Council's adopted Residential Design Guide 2004 are more than met in the illustrative master plan submitted with the scheme in relation to the distance to existing properties. The nearest residential properties are those to the north east on Braidstone Road and Red Deeps. These residential properties will be separated from the site by a bout of open space, and whilst the reserve matters will dictate the final layout, there are no concerns that there will be a loss of residential amenity as a result of this development. 25% affordable housing has been agreed with the developer as per local policy. The applicant submitted a transport assessment to assess the highways and transport implications of the proposed development. It is proposed that vehicular access would be gained via 2 new junctions, a roundabout and a simple priority junction on Gypsy Lane. Gypsy Lane would be realigned within the site in order to remove a sharp bend that is currently subject of local safety concern. This would improve safety, and along with the introduction of lighting and potentially a reduced speed limit and gateway features, would further enhance road safety. The junctions and road alignment have been designed in such a way that buses could potentially access the site in the future, and Highways have requested that the development partially funds a bus service via the 106 legal agreement. The traffic assessment concludes that the proposed development would have no material adverse impact upon the operation of the road network and would be accessible to a range of services and facilities, enabling journeys by sustainable modes of transport consistent with policy. The response from the Highways Authority is one of no objection, subject to conditions and planning obligations which are considered acceptable by officers and agreed with the applicant. Warwickshire County Council Archaeology have no objection, subject to a condition. In relation to flood risk, part of the site along the northern and eastern boundaries is within flood zones 2 and 3. The drawing on the left on the presentation slide shows that the built development will be within flood zone 1, which is the least likely to flood. Legislation requires that consideration is given to the potential impact of flooding on new development, whilst ensuring that flood risk is not increased elsewhere as a result of it. A flood risk assessment was submitted with the application and assessed by both the County Flood Risk Team and the Environment Agency. Both have no objection, subject to conditions, and it is considered that the conditions will mitigate any potential impact on flood risk as per national and local policy. In terms of contamination, a geo-environmental assessment was submitted, and the Council's Environmental Health Team have no objection, subject to a standard site investigation condition, and it is therefore considered that the development complies with policy. An air quality assessment was carried out and predicted that the development would result in a slight increase in air quality, but would not increase exposure to poor air quality within the town of Nuneaton. The Council's Environmental Health Team have no concerns over the potential impact of the scheme on air quality, subject to conditions. In conclusion, it is considered that the impact to air quality is acceptable. An acoustic report was submitted, and the Council's Environmental Health Team again have no objections in terms of noise, subject to condition. Policy HSG 3 of the Borough Plan states the site will need to provide a new local centre to reduce the need to travel and to promote sustainability for the site for both new and existing local residents. This is shown on the master plan before you in pink to the south of the site, off Gypsy Lane, and therefore the proposal complies with this part of the adopted policy. It's just shown there. In terms of ecology, legislation requires that the impact to biodiversity is minimised and indeed enhanced where possible, and that ecological networks, priority species and habitats are protected. The proposal includes either open space, landscaping or green corridors on all boundaries. An ecological report was submitted with the application, which identified habitat within the site and took regard to foraging and commuting bats, badgers, water voles, birds and reptiles. Warwickshire Wildlife Trust has raised no objection to the scheme, subject to conditions, and it is considered that there will be no significant harm to ecology or biodiversity. A tree report was submitted to categorise the trees on the site. The trees to be retained are of a high or relatively high quality, and although it's not the intention to place a tree preservation order on them, it is considered that adequate provision via condition can be made to protect those trees during construction. In regard to the provision of green infrastructure, the application proposes 8.74 hectares across the site and 3 surface water attenuation basins for a further 1.9 hectares. And although not used as formal open space, they are to be kept permanently open to attenuate surface water. Conditions are to be included so as to ensure that there is no provision that there is a provision of a community park on the site, which is shown on the plan with a red star, which is shown to the northeast there. The Council's Parks team have responded with an objection on the ground that parts of the master plan are inadequate in regard to footpaths to access open space and for movement across the site. However, it is considered that this can be covered via conditions and the legal agreement. National policy states planning obligations are a mechanism to make unacceptable development acceptable as long as they meet necessary tests. These are shown in your agenda on page 36. Policy HS1 of the Borough Plan states that development will be required to provide infrastructure appropriate to the scale and context of the site in order to mitigate any impacts of the development. Many of the key development principles set out in Policy HSG3 refer to the contributions and have been agreed with the applicant. Please refer to pages 34 and 35 of your agenda. The canal bridge, called Turnover Bridge, which is there, is to the west of the site. The applicant is willing to enter into a legal agreement to pay a contribution towards improving this bridge, which crosses the Coventry Canal. Let's just go back a minute. And which is considered to be a strategic footpath cycle connection from the site to the approved, subject to a legal agreement, employment site to the west and beyond. The Canal and Rivers Trust originally objected to the scheme as there was no mechanism to allow for the use of this bridge without the Canal and Rivers Trust funding the work. Subsequently, a draft legal agreement has been prepared with a mechanism to allow for the works to take place and being partly funded by this development and by the employment site to the west. However, the Canal and Rivers Trust have maintained their objection as they are not party to the legal agreement, although it is considered there are adequate mechanisms to deliver the footpath link either through the council or by county. As things stand, the Trust do not believe that the legal agreement would provide a suitable basis for the future use of the bridge as a pedestrian and cycle path. During the local plan examination, the applicants entered into a statement of common ground with the council and the applicants of the adjacent employment site to make it clear that responsibility for delivering the crossing should not rest with the applicants of these sites, but that proportionate 106 contributions from both were acceptable so that the council would not have to fully fund the cost of these works. This is to be included within any legal agreement should committee be minded to approve the application and is considered to be reasonable. A request was also submitted on behalf of Whitestone Community Centre for £35,000 to improve existing facilities. However, it was considered that this was not SIL compliant because it referred to works required due to existing issues and the schemes proposed were not costed out. In relation to the other 106 contributions, the applicant has agreed to pay out approximately £5.5 million towards infrastructure requirements across the borough, including education, health and highways, as well as provide up to 144 affordable dwellings on the site. Nonetheless, councillors should note that the applicant has refused to agree to requests submitted by the council's sports development and leisure team and part of the contribution requested by the council's parks and countryside team. As in the applicant's opinion, they are not SIL compliant. The full breakdown of the 106 contributions that have been refused are on page 35 of your agenda and amount to just over £1.3 million towards sports provision and £237,000 toward the Pingles area of the destination park. Planning officers differ with this opinion, as there will be an identified need for sports facilities as a result of the development. Likewise, there will be an increased use of Riversley and Miners Welfare Parks, which is the destination parks. Both of these requests for planning contributions are considered necessary, directly related to the development, and fairly related in scale and kind. In regard to the sports development contributions, officers have pointed out that elsewhere in the Borough Plan, Policy SA1, it makes particular reference to community, sports and physical activity facilities. Officers also point out that the site is referenced within the Infrastructure Delivery Plan, which refers to sports and physical activity facilities. The applicant has correctly pointed out that within the strategic housing site, HSG3, neither sports development monies nor destination park contributions are included as a necessary requirement of the key development principles. They also point out that all strategic sites within the Borough Plan do require sports development monies and destination park contributions. Consequently, the applicant contends that these two requests cannot be included. Both the Council's Parks and Sports team argue that the omission was accidental and that national policies and local policies within the Borough Plan, together with the Council's adopted Infrastructure Delivery Plan, identify the need for all strategic sites and major applications over 10 dwellings to contribute to existing and new play and sports provision in the borough. The local policies that make specific reference to this are provided in your agenda, pages 17 to 20. As stated at the start of my presentation, members requested this was deferred as the last committee so that officers could hold further discussions with the applicant in relation to this. However, the applicant has categorically stated that their position still stands and that they want members to determine the application on this basis. The legal team conclude that there are grounds for refusal due to non-agreement to these two 106 contributions, which could potentially be supported at appeal, but that any outcome of an appeal is unclear and the planning inspector could consider that refusal on this basis is unreasonable and award costs against the council. This does provide a difficult and very balanced decision for members, especially as the Borough Plan has so recently been adopted. However, officers consider that by granting approval, the benefits of the development are that the site can be brought forward to contribute to the 5 years housing provision, provide much needed affordable housing, provide other 106 contributions, provide plain open space and access within the site, provide a new local centre for existing residents and allow highway improvements to Gypsy Lane. All of the above do provide benefits and weigh heavily within the planning balance. In conclusion, it is recommended to members to approve the application subject to conditions printed on the agenda and signing of a 106 legal agreement. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Jackie. We do have 3 speakers on this item. There is a suggestion that this item could be deferred. So those speakers, you're perfectly entitled to put your case tonight as you intended, but also you will get a second bite of the cherry if the committee decides to defer to the next meeting. That will be discussed later. So, Councillor Condacor, you're the first one on the list. Do you wish to continue speaking?
Yes, thank you. We've got apologies if I'm a bit jerky and quieter than normal. 3 points I wanted to make. First, the officer talked about increased air quality. That's a totally ludicrous statement because it can be interpreted 2 ways. It should be increased pollution or decreased pollution. You know which way round the statement means then. I believe the officer wants us to understand there's a small amount of increased pollution but because they use the term air quality, that is misleading. Second point I wanted to make is about condition 27. We're making progress on the turnback bridge, but what happens in these developments is the cycle link is the last thing that happens. In Wellington, it's been 7 years and we still haven't got the little cycle link in. So condition 27 allows the development to put the ramp to the turnover bridge in actually 90% of the way through the development. It depends what order the phases happen. So I would like condition 27 to be reworded so we take out the bit about phases. So the condition should say, no development shall commence until details, including specification for the ramp, have been submitted. So the only thing that would require is they submit details of the ramp, and that no dwelling should be occupied until the ramp has been constructed. So basically, before we occupy houses on this site, we need to make the safe cycling route. To actually allow it to happen at phase 3 or phase 6 or phase 2 is ludicrous, because we're not going to put people's life at risk cycling down Gypsy Lane. The third point I want to make is the bus service. Extending a Whitestone bus onto this development will lead a dead-end bus service. The Borough Plan is full of stuff about the A444 corridor. It is clearly the place that people need to get to by bus to then get onto the 48 bus to Coventry, Bedworth, whatever, 48 buses every 10 minutes, or the new railway station, which hopefully will have a train every 15 minutes to Coventry one day. So we clearly can't have a dead-end bus service, so any payment for a bus service must go as far as the Coventry Road, and then whether it goes down to Bermuda, across the cinema, or whatever, it is then a service that connects, and we don't have a ludicrous situation where people living on this development who don't have a car would have to get a bus from here all the way through Whitestone back to Nuneaton and then back up the Coventry Road to get to Bedworth for Coventry. Thank you, and sorry about my voice.
I think a few of us have been through that recently with the voice. So, do any members of the committee have any points of clarification they wish to raise, questions of clarification? No, thank you very much. Bill Shepherd, thank you.
First of all, I'd like to raise concern about the lack of consultation on this. The last time this was consulted on was over 2 years ago. On my walks with my dogs, I walk regularly around that area, and nobody knows that this development's going, or very few people. I will say that I took part in the first round of consultation with the developer. I raised concern about a community centre on the site, that it would put Wembrook Community Centre and Whitestone Community Centre in danger because they're already established. The developer then agreed with us that they would do a commuted sum to support both Wembrook to upgrade the facilities and Whitestone community centres. So I would ask if you're mindful of deferring to put notices up along Marston Lane, because then people do not know about it. The first time this was proposed, they were horrified when somebody cut all the shrubbery down along the Wembrook, where disturbing the waterfalls there. I have raised this with Warwickshire Wildlife. But if the committee are mindful of proving it, which officers are recommending, I would ask specifically that the trees on the site, because there's some really mature oaks there, that TPOs are placed on them, because we remember all too well development in the borough where developers have come in, and I can think of Leyland Road as one, and stripped out all the trees. I would also ask that there's a buffer zone, if you're mindful of approval, at the Red Deep side, because we have the Griff Brook there, we have a bit of protection to the Wembrook along Marston Lane, but there's no protection along the Red Deep side of it. I would also ask, I wanted to speak at the inspection, but I wasn't allowed to. They seemed to think that there was a complete free cycle run through from Gypsy Lane through to the Pingles and indeed the town centre. That's not the case because there's a problem crossing Donnythorne Avenue. So I would ask that as part of the development, we ask the developer to provide a crossing there to make it safe to go from the development straight through to the town centre. I'm quite happy with the use of the what we know as the Molly Bridge, because we've been pushing for a footpath between there and Griff Hollows for a long time. I'm sorry, you're right. 3 minutes.
Does any member of the committee have any points of clarification? No. Thank you very much, Bill. And that moves us on to Chris Hall of Tranport Investments. Thank you.
A fair and reasonable and very supportive report. I would take issue with only one word in it. At reason for deferral, it advises that Tranport is not willing to consider the requested sports development funding and destination parks contribution. This is incorrect. We have considered this very, very carefully, and a more accurate word would be accept. We cannot accept them for the reasons set out in the first and third paragraphs on page 36 of your report, and crucially for the reasons set out in the 6th paragraph on that page, the one which notes the specific absence of these requirements from Strategic Housing Policy HSG3. I would ask you to approve this application for 3 reasons. Firstly, the Borough Plan was adopted as recently as the 10th of June. This was the end of a very lengthy plan preparation process, during which the wording of every policy has been scrutinised in great detail by the public, by promoters of sites, by the council officers and by councillors themselves, and by an independent inspector who found the plan sound in April. Unlike every other strategic housing policy in the new Borough Plan, HSG3 is silent on the requirement for these 2 contributions. Secondly, because of Section 38(6) of the Planning and Compulsory Purchase Act 2004, which, as you know, is the section that requires planning applications be determined in accordance with the development plan. In this case, the development plan is the Borough Plan adopted on the 10th of June, which should afford great weight given that it is only 2 months old. Your officers have weighed our comments concerning SIL compliance in the balance with their own views that they meet the tests. Tellingly, after weighing our respective positions, they have recommended that you approve. I have obviously now noted the addendum to tonight. Thirdly, as a member of a planning committee myself, I can understand that members may be concerned that approval will set an unwelcome precedent. I would say to you that there is no danger of such a precedent being set, for the simple reason all other strategic residential allocations specifically capture the 2 contributions in question. In summary, we cannot accept the 2 requests as they are contrary to statutory regulations and guidance, and are not required by the terms of a policy adopted by you 10 weeks ago after several years of scrutiny. We are not anti-play, open space or sport. We have already agreed to over £700,000 out of the £946,000 requested by your Parks Department. The total 106 contributions could be well in excess of £6 million, plus the 25% affordable housing. I would therefore respectfully request that you determine this application in accordance with the officer's recommendation to approve and in accordance with your recently adopted local plan. Thank you, Chair.
I do have a point of clarification if no one else does. You've stated that you want the committee to determine it tonight. If the committee is minded to defer, would it be your intention to appeal on the grounds of non-determination, or would you be willing to agree an extension with the council for it to be considered at the next committee?
I would need to sleep on that, Chair, second time, and I've only just learnt that you're only just taking council's opinion. I would have thought that should have been taken before it went to the first committee in July, so I really would have to sleep on that and discuss it with the board.
Ask that question because I think that may, if it does come up in debate, members may wish to take that into account in their decision, which is why I asked the question. Before we move on to the substantive item, do you have anything you wish to come back on? No. Well, as I understand it then, the new recommendation from officers is to defer for council's opinion. To enable debate to take place, can I move the new recommendation as printed on the addendum that the item be deferred to the next planning committee. Does that receive a seconder? I caught Councillor Watkins' eye first, so thank you. So it's open to any member. Councillor Phillips. Okay, thank you, Councillor Phillips. Councillor Lloyd.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just on the same vein, actually. You know, at the end of the day, yeah, it looks as if there's been a mistake being made somewhere. But, you know, we've been criticised on this council time and time again for not putting infrastructure in, not building new facilities, etc., etc. No matter how you look at it, this amount of houses is going to add to the sporting facilities within this borough. Whether it's new people moving into those properties or people moving from elsewhere in the borough into those properties, there's still going to be new people moving into the borough. So there is, at the end of the day, a responsibility on the developers to pay into those new facilities. They will need expanding, there's no doubt in my mind, to take on board all the people that are coming into the borough. So on this occasion, on this one, I think I agree with the recommendation that we do defer, seek Queen's Counsel. You know, at the end of the day, if they do want to take us on non-determination, that's entirely up to those, but we shouldn't be swayed by that. This is a massive amount of money that's going into our infrastructure within this borough, what we've been criticised as a council for in the past, and we should do everything we possibly can to make sure we're on firm ground. So I agree with the recommendation that we should defer for council.
Yeah, thank you. Well, pretty much the same, really. I do think that we should press Warwickshire Wildlife Trust because, again, there's no objection from them or no reply from them. Also, if it was a mistake, it was a mistake that it was missed. But 575 houses coming to this borough is obviously going to bring a lot of people, and any developer developing in this borough should recognise that and give towards parks and countryside. So I'm quite happy to defer this until we get further advice. So I'll defer it.
Oh, okay. Councillor Shepherd.
In respect of TPOs, I've noticed that you said about TPOs on the trees with development. If we are moving towards deferring it for another 3 weeks, I know an awful lot of trees can disappear in 3 weeks, so I wondered whether we could put an amendment onto that recommendation to say that we put a TPO on the trees for now, and then at least we're safeguarding them.
Put a TPO on, that's what I meant.
Are members happy to accept that as a friendly amendment to the recommendation? Okay. I do have a question for officers about this. If the committee doesn't defer and considers it tonight, then looking at the table of contributions requested, those ones which are contested by the applicant, would the approval be on condition that they pay those, and if they disagree with them, they would have to appeal those conditions?
No, because the contribution...
I think so. Just for my clarification then, our approval would include those requirements, but then they wouldn't sign up to the agreement.
The applicant has made it clear, both in correspondence with me in the past and tonight, that having considered those obligations, they are not accepting them and won't pay for them. So that your decision has got to be based on the fact that they have stated that.
Okay, thank you. My personal view on this, because I did have myself down to speak, is that I am extremely unhappy that we're in this position, because regardless of the right or wrongs of the individual site allocations, we've been through that. I think we have all as a council signed up to the principle that if you develop within this borough, you should pay your way towards offsetting whatever harm your development may cause. And I am loath to vote to potentially lose almost £2 million in total when this is a major gateway into the borough. It affects my ward as well, as it goes up Gypsy Lane through Wembrook, through Attleborough and Whitestone. And I do still have other concerns about the application and the road issues and the pathway issues. But my big concern is that for whatever reason, we may lose that money, and that to me is not acceptable. So whilst weighing the significant response from Mr. Hall that they may not agree, I think in the interests of the residents, the greater risk for me is not getting that money. It is a judgment call, and I think most members would agree with that, so I will reluctantly go with the recommendation for deferral. Unless any other member wishes to speak, I think that's moving us towards a conclusion. So all those who are in favour of the recommendation for deferral, as well as investigating the issue about an interim tree preservation order, as suggested by Councillor Shepherd, all those in favour of that recommendation? All those against? I think that was unanimous. The application is deferred to the next committee. Thank you very much. So we'll skip item 2 for now because we have a speaker on item 3. So if we can move on to Smithfield's 157 Coventry Road, Bulkington. Jackie.
Thank you, Chair. The application site shown in red on the slide is located in Warwickshire Greenbelt. To the west is the residential property of 59 Coventry Road, and to the east is open land which has recently been granted planning permission for 6 dwellings, beyond which is a further residential dwelling of 151 Coventry Road. This is an outline application to include access only, but indicative plans have been provided to show that the site can accommodate a detached 4-bedroom dwelling. The scale, layout, design, appearance and landscaping is not a consideration at this point. The site is currently occupied by 1 mobile home, which was allowed at appeal in 2018. This has temporary planning permission until the 23rd of May 2021. The site within the blue line shown on the slide was granted outline planning consent for 6 residential dwellings, semis, in October 2018. At the time, the application was recommended for refusal based on inappropriate development within the Greenbelt. However, the application was approved by Planning Application Committee as it was considered that it was limited infilling and would improve the area and be in keeping with the existing street pattern. Reserved matters were subsequently approved in March 2019. The planning history for the site outlined in red is shown on page 61 of the agenda. The immediate adjacent neighbours were notified of the planning application and there have been no neighbour objections to the planning application. There has been one objection from consultees, which was from the council's refuse team, as they were concerned that no bin collection point was shown. This is now shown on the plans. Notwithstanding the level of objection, Councillor Smith has called in the application to Planning Application Committee. The key issues are shown on the screen before you. In relation to the appropriateness of the proposed development in the Greenbelt, the MPPF and Policy DS7 of the Borough Plan states that there is a general presumption against inappropriate development in the Greenbelt, which by definition is harmless unless very special circumstances demonstrate otherwise or such harm is outweighed by the benefits of the proposal. Paragraph 145 of the MPPF states that the types of development which are acceptable within the Greenbelt include buildings for agriculture and forestry, the provision of facilities for outdoor sport, outdoor creation, cemeteries and burial grounds and allotments, the extension or alteration of a building provided that it does not result in disproportionate additions over and above the size of the original building, the replacement of a building providing it is not materially larger, limited infilling in villages, limited affordable housing for local needs, and limited infilling or the partial or complete redevelopment of previously developed land, excluding temporary buildings, which would not have a greater impact on the openness of the Greenbelt than the existing development, or not cause substantial harm to the openness of the Greenbelt, where the development would reuse previously developed land and contribute to meeting an identified affordable housing need within the area of the local planning authority. In reference to limited infilling in villages, officers consider that the application site is outside of the boundary of the urban area of Bulkington and is therefore not considered to be infilling within a village. In relation to consideration that it is limited infilling on previously developed land, this policy specifically excludes temporary buildings in reference to previous development. It is considered that this wording is key as the site only has temporary permission for the residential purposes of one gypsy pitch comprising of a day room, the siting of caravans, together with the retention of ancillary hard-standing and boundary fences. The temporary permission is due to lapse in May 2021, after which time the inspector stated that the permitted use shall cease and all caravans, building, structures, materials and equipment brought onto the land or works undertaken on it shall be removed and the land restored to its original greenfield condition. The MPPF and Policy DS7 of the Borough Plan states that inappropriate development is harmful to Greenbelt and should only be considered when there are special circumstances. No such supporting documentation has been provided. The Council's Planning Policy team advised they have no objection to the proposal as they consider the permission on the adjacent land for housing for 6 residential properties has already diluted the purpose of the Greenbelt in this area, and they argue that the latest application is therefore limited infilling. However, the adjacent site has not yet been developed, and whilst there is a good chance it will proceed, there is always a possibility it will not. In reference to the impact on the openness of the Greenbelt, the NPPF states that the fundamental aim of Greenbelt policy is to prevent urban sprawl by keeping land permanently open. It has to be noted that the site is not currently an open field, but it was prior to the occupation of the caravan and associated works, and will resort to the same at the expiry of the temporary period unless consent is given to extend the site for a longer period. It is therefore considered that approving the new dwelling would mean the loss of the remaining open gap to the detriment of the openness of the Greenbelt. In relation to the purposes of the Greenbelt and impact on the character of the Greenbelt, the NPPF states the fundamental aim of Greenbelt is to prevent urban sprawl, to prevent merging of neighbouring towns, to safeguard the countryside from encroachment, to preserve the setting and character of historic towns, to assist in urban regeneration. It is clear that whilst the plans are only indicative, the proposed development could encroach deeper into the Greenbelt than the existing properties, as the proposal is deeper than the existing properties with a detached garage further to the rear. The site is shown there. Again, this is an indicative plan, but that's the garage I'm referring to. But as I say, the actual layout is purely indicative at this stage. That's an indicative front elevation of the house, and below is the street scene I'll go into later. The only property that the proposed dwelling will impact is 159 Coventry Road, Bulkington. The side elevation of this neighbouring property, facing the application site, has no habitable room windows to be affected. That's this plot there. As stated, the plans submitted are indicative to show that the site can accommodate a dwelling, and the Reserved Matters application will consider the layout, size and scale. Therefore, consideration will be given at the Reserved Matters to ensure the development complies with the Residential Design Guide in terms of privacy, aspect and light to neighbouring properties. In relation to the impact on visual amenity, the Residential Design Guide states that development, including infilling, should appear as part of an extension to an existing settlement. The indicative layout provides an illustrative plan of how the dwelling might look, but this could change. However, it is considered that the proposal can be designed to be in keeping with the street form and character of the area. The drawing at the bottom of the slide shows the property in relation to the existing neighbours and the approved 6 semi-detached properties. The one on the far left is the existing house. The 6 houses on the far right are existing houses. These are the 6 semi-detached houses just approved, and this is the site that it refers to. In reference to highway safety, Rochester County Council highways have no objection subject to conditions, although they note that there is a telegraph pole adjacent to the proposed access which may require moving, which would be chargeable to the applicant. In relation to the presumption in favour of sustainable development is at the very heart of planning policies, which states that decision taking should be based on the presumption of sustainable development. Policy DS1 of the Borough Plan reiterates the need for sustainable development to improve the economic, social and environmental conditions in the area, providing the application accords with current policies. As the application does not accord with Greenbelt policy or indicate any clear benefits that demonstrably outweigh its detrimental harm, it is considered that the proposal is not sustainable development, as the adverse impacts cannot be mitigated. The NPPF promotes a presumption in favour of sustainable development in accordance with adopted policies or an up-to-date development plan, unless material considerations indicate otherwise. Material considerations do indicate otherwise in this instance. The approval of 6 dwellings on the adjacent site does provide some material weight when considering the application. Officers consider that it has not been demonstrated that the proposed dwelling will provide benefits to outweigh the harm to the Greenbelt, which in itself weighs heavily against the proposal. In light of the above, it is considered that the proposal is refused on the grounds of inappropriate development in the Greenbelt and subsequent harm to it. The recommended reasons for refusal are therefore shown on your agenda, page 68 and 69. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Jackie. We do have one speaker on this item, Malcolm Jones. If you want to press the big button in the middle.
Right. We have been elected to speak on behalf of the residents of Coventry Road. We ourselves feel that the house that's has applied for, we feel that it will fall in line with the houses and it will be a lot more better than having static stuck there. You know, and as regards the telegraph pole, that's been removed. So that's all I need to say on the subject. As residents, we feel as though we'd benefit from the 4-bedroomed house being there alongside with the 6 houses. Alongside with our houses, we feel we're better off having that there than statics. So please consider the residents in this area. That's all I need to say on the subject. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any points of clarification from the committee? No. Anything officers wish to come back on? Okay, so in order to enable debate to take place, can I move the recommendation as printed, which is to refuse planning permission? Does that receive a seconder? Councillor Phillips. Does anyone wish to speak on the item? Councillor Smith.
I find myself in a position where I'm once again disagreeing with officers' recommendation. I know this plot well. In fact, 2 years ago we actually refused planning permission, as you heard, for a gypsy plot. This was overturned at appeal, and in my mind, although it's greenbelt on paper, it ceased to be greenbelt once it was tarmacked over and gravelled and had a mobile home on there. With the approval of the 6 houses on the adjacent plot, this stands out as a very odd situation now, where you've got something there with a mobile home that's totally out of character with the street scene. And if we have a 4-bedroom house on there, it will complete the street scene. And instead of deterring from the neighbouring houses, it will actually add value to them. So I can understand why the residents are very keen for this. The other point is, I know there's a limitation on the appeal. They were given 3 years to keep this as a gypsy plot. But we know full well, and I know down that road, or any temporary gypsy plots that have been allowed have never actually been turned back into greenbelt. Sooner or later they get turned into a permanent gypsy plot. And part of the reason for that is we don't have enough gypsy plots in the borough. And the Borough Plan has not amended this. It's something we do need to look at. And when it comes to 3 years on this, I'm sure if we don't let a house go on there, that the only use for it will be for a gypsy plot to continue on there. So I'm very keen to have a house on there instead. So I shall be voting against recommendation and asking for approval on the basis that it won't deter from the green belt and it will improve the street scene.
Member? Okay, I did have myself down to speak. Initially, when I saw the application saying greenbelt and refusing planning permission, that's usually a big tick in my box as a starting point. But then when you read further on into the paperwork and indeed the presentation from the officers, my balance starts to go the other way. Like Councillor Smith, I know of a number of occasions where I've sat in this committee and we have had applications to convert temporary permission on gypsy and traveller sites into permanent ones, and the officer recommendation almost to every single one has been for approval. So I understand officers can't fetter their discretion when it comes to future recommendations, but to say that the application, that the current use is temporary, in reality we all know different, and it will not be returned to the green belt in one way, shape or form. It will either continue as a gypsy and traveller site, which isn't a green belt usage, or it has a house put on it, which again isn't a green belt usage. I would almost have bought the argument had we not had those 6 houses in the field next door. Presumably this authority will be relying on those 6 houses as counting towards partial windfall sites to count towards our housing target numbers. But then to say building one next door is inappropriate because it would be harmful to the green belt, those two arguments don't stack up to me. It is either one or the other. You cannot have both. You can't have your cake and eat it, so to speak. And the fact that planning policy has come back, and I highlighted the words on page 64, it said the proposal can therefore be seen as limited infilling in their view. I understand that these are, to a degree, with planning officers' subjective decisions, and that's the reason why we have planning committees in the first place. So I will not be supporting the recommendation. I only moved it to try and enable debate, but I do see it as limited infilling in a wider village setting. It is a village. It doesn't necessarily have to be the village centre, in my view. You take the village as a whole, and Bulkington, by definition, is a village, and we have those 6 houses next door which do dilute in that particular neck of the woods the green belt. So I don't think that having regard to the pattern of development in that particular area, it would dilute the purpose of the green belt even further. So I will not vote for the recommendation. But having said that, we need to move to a vote. So unless there's anyone else who wishes to speak, the recommendation is therefore one of refusal, just so we're all clear. All those in favour of refusing the planning application, please show. I make that 2. All those against? I make that 10. And just in case, any abstentions? None. So the application is not approved. We therefore need a it is not refused. It's usually the other way around, sorry. We therefore need a recommendation. So from the chair, I will move that, because we need to have a reason as well for going against officer recommendation, don't we? That it is not... What did I say again?
That you considered it to be limited infilling in a village setting, so acceptable within the green belt.
Okay. Everyone happy with those reasons? Can I ask a question, because something did occur to me. Can we at this stage remove permitted development rights, or does that have to be at detailed stage?
No, it should be at the outline stage, so yes, you can.
Because I am concerned about potential further encroachment into the green belt. So when I was listening to the rest of the discussion, it did occur to me that perhaps as a committee, whilst if we are minded to approve it, we might wish to remove its permitted development rights to control any further sprawl into the green belt. You've got those 6 there, but if this was to want to become any bigger, then this committee might want to have a view on that in future. And it doesn't say that they can't do it. They would have to come back to committee as a planning application.
You can take away the permitted development for them to put things in, say, in the rear garden, for instance. But yes, you're right. It doesn't mean that they can't do it. It just means they need. It's
just a further check, isn't it? Yeah. So I would move the approval with that additional removal of the permitted development rights. Does that receive a seconder, Councillor Gran? Does anyone wish to speak on that? Because it is now a new debate item. No? All those in favour of the recommendation for approval on those grounds and that additional removal of permitted development rights, all those in favour? I got 10 again. Yep. All those against? 2. So that application is now approved.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. That then moves us on to agenda item number 2, going back a bit. Before I invite officers to begin on that one, thank you very much. I have been informed that the council has received a request from the applicant to defer this application so as to enable them to carry on with negotiations with Highways, as I believe Highways have raised an objection and they wish to try and overcome that. So as we don't spend time unnecessarily debating, can I move deferral to enable those to take place? That's got a seconder, Councillor Gran and Councillor Phillips, I believe. All those in favour of deferral? I think that 11, I think. All those against? Abstentions? 1. Well, I believe that concludes the business of tonight's planning committee. Thank you very much, everyone, and I wish you all a safe journey home. Thank you.